formerly VanAlystyne property located at southeast corner of intersection between VanAlystyne Road and Shoemaker. Applicant Inside Land Development, request preliminary, final site plan and subdivision approval. Public hearing for a cluster development on a 4.01 acre parcel located in a R-2 single family residential district under the Code of Town of Webster.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for your time and hearing my application this evening with me. My name is Rudy Neufeld. I work with Crosstown Construction. With me this evening is Mr. Mark Yonder from DME. I'll give a brief overview. I know you're very familiar with this project, a few details, and then if you have any technical questions, Martin will be able to handle that for us. Application this evening is for preliminary final approval for the subdivision under the 192-27 code for cluster developments. The conventional plan was approved and it yielded 6 lots. The property is located on the southeast corner of VanAlystyne Road and Shoemaker Road and is currently zoned residential R2. Total property is 4.01 acres and it still will be 6 single-family building lots. The lot standards conform to the cluster development under the current town code. All 6 lots will have individual private access from either VanAlystyne, 5 of them, or a Shoemaker Road. The utilities include connecting to the sanitary sewer, which is located to the south of our property, and public water is on Shoemaker Road and will be serviced by individual mains to each of the homeowners' property. Stormwater drainage will be controlled by a stormwater management facility discharging into an existing storm sewer going easterly onto Northern Dane. The benefits of the clustering development, as we have discussed with the board and with our adjoining neighbors, number one, it significantly gives us a larger buffer to the adjacent properties to the south. There's also a very nicely vegetated hedgerow with pine trees that we will be able to preserve. It will reduce impervious surfaces, reduce the length of the driveways, and provide a larger green space to the south of the homes, and providing a better view for our neighbors to the east as well. Also, this will create an open space which will be dedicated to the town of Webster to include the stormwater facility and an access road to get in and out, and also will provide additional green space. One other benefit to clustering will address fire protection from the fire marshal, as all the houses will front onto Shoemaker or VanAlystyne Road and not necessitating any access roads that would make it difficult for fire access. So we've met with the PRC, addressed their comments, we have them in writing. I'll be happy to answer any questions that the board may have, or if they're technical in nature and above my head, we'll invite up Mr. Young.
Anybody? This was previously reviewed with PRC. The lot was under 90 feet. I don't know what the issues were, I don't think, to be honest with you at this point. You got a sheet of the, sheet comments? Let's see that. These were comments, actually, these are from the PRC comments. This pool here is moving away. Cleanouts, sump pumps we know where. Where were the sump pumps going, Wade?
discharging?
They're gonna be discharged to a little, stone leap, and that was part of the stormwater management, that it absorbed some of it, and then let the runoff eventually go to the pond, rather than directly into the pond. We could have gone either way, but that was the
So
suggestion.
they're going towards the ponds in the back.
Yes.
And so the access road would be delineated with boulders and trees. That access was going in the back, the rear line of the homes. And then that piece was conveyed to the town of Webster, parcel in the back, right?
Correct. 0.08 acres.
That would be the open space on it. All right, you know what, why don't we do this? And they've addressed the questions that were brought up at the PRC. Why don't we open it? Obviously, there's some neighbors that are concerned, we'll let them see where we're at with it. So, if there is anyone here to speak either for or against in regard to the Laurel Landing subdivision in VanAlystyne,
What does PRC stand for?
it's a project review committee. What that is, it's the departments like the sewer department, the water, engineering department, we're represented. It's a meeting where everybody is there just to look at the drawing and come up with comments and concerns. And that's what was given to them, and then they addressed it. So if there's anyone here wishing to speak for it?
Talk about a service
Oh,
road.
man, we can't talk from there. If you want to speak, though, you can, you're more than welcome. We'll just go up to the mic, give us your name and address. And if you're here for this one or the next project, all I ask is that you, just, keep the comments to just a few minutes. I mean, we can't just keep rattling on whether we like or dislike something. It doesn't do us any good. Just give us your feelings. Yes,
My
sir.
name's Jonathan Bach, I live at 229 NZ Circle. The question I know they brought up about a service road going back to the green space, and just curious where that picture's coming from. Haven't seen the drawing showing that.
You have not? You can show it to you. Really, the service road that's going pretty much goes at the rear line of the houses that are there. You can see it there, if you look at- which really doesn't disrupt the piece of land that's being left as open space there.
We do have the technical map. There'll be a service road so that the trucks, it's probably a rarity, but in the event that a sewer truck or a town truck had to go, it's basically a gravel driveway that is then topsoiled and seeded on top so that a truck could, even in wet conditions, drive on it, and it still has capacity to hold up to a 40,000-pound truck. So basically, when the grass grows and it's mowed, you won't see the road, but it'll be delineated with 4x4 markers, so even in a storm event, somebody could see where the road is.
So the green space goes across the whole back of the parcel there?
Yep, about like this part here.
So this is the back of the lot.
That's the back of the lot, that's your brother's house.
The houses are in line with 107?
That's the minimum that they be. They could be back further if somebody, for some reason, wanted.
Closer than that.
They can't be any closer than it. Correct.
So you've got them drawn the minimum setback.
They're drawn at the minimum setback, yeah. And that'll be staked out by the engineers. A person could go back further if they wanted a 3-car garage or a courtyard entrance. That house could be 10 or 20 or even 30 feet back.
What potentially would be this?
I think we should be speaking into the mic.
I got a question on the side setback minimum. I know this is a cluster house which allows once in a while, I think it's 10 foot. Potentially we may see 8 foot.
That's the minimum, 8 foot on each side.
That's one problem I had with going with the cluster because that opened up the door to these houses right on top of each other.
It's a cluster here, it's not 8 feet on either side. It's a total, oh my gosh. Total 50, so you need 10, yeah. Yeah.
It's 15 feet.
So you can potentially end up with 16 feet between these houses instead of what the zoning code is 15 feet would be 30 foot. He's been granted the cluster development coverage, I guess, allowing him to go with the cluster setbacks, right?
Yeah, the setbacks, what he's got though, what he is showing is the width of the lots are 90, almost 90 and a half, 90 feet
Yeah,
wide.
when this was brought up before, that wasn't discussed. The whole idea of going with the cluster got him around getting a variance to go to narrow the lots to 90 foot. My understanding, we're still gonna maintain the 15-foot side setback, is what the code calls for.
Well, 90 foot, what would you put on a 90-foot lot, Rudy?
If you have 8 and 8, so you have 16 feet, that still gives you 84 foot wide. It's been a long time since I've built a
Yeah,
house
that's what I'm
84
trying to
feet
think
wide.
too, is if you had, well, standard would be, in an R3 would be a 100-foot wide lot,
Right.
and you'd have 15 feet on either side. So that means you'd have a 70-foot lot, or, I'm sorry, 70 foot for a house. In this case, if you kept, okay, so set a restriction, maybe if that's something that would work, I don't know, we'll see how it goes. Set a side setback of 12 foot on either side, 24 off of 90 is, who's the mathematician here? Be about 60-some feet, right? So you got a 60-some foot house.
We will, I would be willing to, I know that was an issue with your mom's house. Would be better for us if this is something that you consider. We'd like to keep the cluster development, which is part of town code 8 and 8, but I would be willing to make sure that on your mom's side, that maintains 15 feet. Leave the rest alone, but for your mom's side, to make it 15. I would consider that.
In other words, it's not cast in stone, you consider it a situation wise, you know.
No, I would commit before the board and the neighbors right here that I would make that 15 feet on the easterly border of your mother's side.
She appreciate that, I can say that.
I would do it.
Wish the house all the way down had this 15-foot side setback.
It may be that they do. I don't often build, in the last 100 houses I've built, I don't think I've built an 80-foot wide house. So it may very well be there, but
You anticipate two-story homes or ranch?
if I had a guess, I'd say 3 will be colonials and 3 will be ranches, but that's up to whatever the public buys.
All right.
So what would you go ahead, use the microphone, say what you.
No, I just, I mean, you know, my interest is my mother lives, borders the property, she's at 807. She's the first house that parcel ordered against on Shoemaker. So I'm here representing her interest. She's got a concern about setbacks and how close they are to the lot lines. I mean, you know, the other neighbors can speak for themselves. I know we were hoping to, we pushed to get 6 houses on that property, but we were hoping to see if the setbacks still remain the R3 setback, you know, 15-foot side setback. So,
Cluster development law says the minimum distance between structures and separate lots which make up a cluster development shall be 15 feet no less than 5 feet in that distance on the side.
So what does that give, that's how many feet that are between two houses?
The minimum is 5 and 10. 15 feet, 5 and 10, 15 feet between houses.
We're gonna have 16. So we, on the next one. We'll have 8 and 8.
I just, you know, when I consider the area, that, you know, that's the whole problem with the cluster housing. The spacing between the houses on Shoemaker Road, there's nothing close to it. Close to that.
Okay, Rudy, I mean, you've got good lots, I mean, cluster, I think, call it, you can have 75 foot, I think it's minimum on a cluster development, but you've got 90 feet. So suppose we stay 12 foot from the sidelines. I mean, if you take off 90, take away 25, say 12 and a half foot, it's still a 65 foot wide house. And you're in a residential neighborhood with existing neighbors. Could you live with that? Yes.
That would be, that would be
65 foot, that's a
difficult, not
good
for me
size
to
house.
sell it, but now if somebody wants a 3-car garage, they can have it.
Well, then maybe they shouldn't be in a cluster development too.
I'm not, that would be
See what I'm
difficult
saying?
for us. We're not opposed to
If-
going
if
back,
this-
now I know
you
your
know-
brother's here.
Let's put it this way, if this was a cluster development going in, you had a road going in, you had a road going into a subdivision, and they were all clustered, like a lot of them are, I could understand the setup, but this is right along Main Road, where there's existing houses around there. And all I'm saying is to keep something that's similar to what's there. Let's see, you know the distance between circular and separate? That's what we have a cluster development, shall we? 15 feet from the distance of 5 feet, they go in each of the lots.
The reason we migrated to cluster development is because the town staff and the neighbors didn't like the original layout of 6, which met all town code. So we went this way, put it together, giving an acre back to the town, keeping the trees. So we like to stick with what, we're exceeding what the code recommends. So we went an additional foot, and we'd like to keep it with the clause that we'd be happy to make an exception for the easterly boundary. Now, it may work out that we'll have the 12 or 15 feet, but to restrict it would be difficult for us. We prefer going back to the 6-lot original development that met the town code and build it that way, rather than restrict
So what you're
ourselves.
agreeing to is next to,
The easterly property is not split.
leaving a greater distance, that's okay.
Well, that's what he offered, I mean.
Well, we can put that, we can require.
Prior to this, there was no discussion of this setback with him.
Would you be okay with that?
I would want, we want some concession, I hope the idea, I mean, I don't know where the board stands on this
Well,
one.
whatever, I mean, yeah, we want, let's put it this way, we're not here to destroy anybody's.
I don't live there, I mean, we got other people here that live here, I don't know where they stand with this, but personally, when they talked cluster, this was my concern, that this opened up the door to a very short setback. And there's no discussion of that, using that advantage of that short setback prior to tonight, at least not with me. So, and this was, I had a concern about this coming down, and this is what's happened. Potentially, you could end up with these 16 feet or whatever you were talking between the minimum, what's going to allow us. So, the understanding, we agreed to this because we were going to stick to that 15-foot R3, R2, this is R2, right? They're both R3, R2 is 15 foot. So, that was the understanding I had. I don't know, the other people didn't, unless they're hearing something different.
Anybody, guys have any concerns on it, or can you express it? Is there anything else wishing to speak? Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for not watching the elections tonight and staying with us. I've passed out a few copies of
Yeah.
my presentation for you. My name is Laura Flick, and I live at 804 Shoemaker Road in a single-family home with 210 feet of frontage, 350 feet depth, equaling 1.72 acres, on the north side of the road facing the parcel in question. On either side of my home, on the north side of Shoemaker Road, are both 2-acre-plus lots in the HAP subdivision, my neighbor. The purpose of my statement tonight is threefold. To review the steps taken and the successes already achieved by the builder in site land development represented by Rudy Neufeld after purchasing the 2 parcels, the home on 590 VanAlystyne Road over here, and the field/building lot within its neighborhood. To propose and my to highlight several requirements of Zone 2 versus cluster development as it pertains to a particular building/field lot within the general neighborhood, and to propose 5 questions to the board of the town of Webster before making an action on this motion. There are several details. I'll give you a highlight of the purchase of the home on VanAlystyne, including the building lot, The purchase of the home was for $164,000. It was 1.03 acres. In 2018, it was sold in 2019 for $195,000 after it was reduced to less than a half an acre. Success in site development. The variances were done to make it less than a half an acre, but they were able to keep at that zoning board meeting a 100-foot frontage of that property. Now, the additional field deemed a building lot on the south side of Shoemaker was purchased also in 2018 for $85,000. This is approximately 3.5 acres. And after the zoning, they were able to bring that up to 4.01 acres to make it more preferable to build. The Planning Board of Webster met on August 20th of 19, and a sketch was made. And this was where the 2 flagship lots and everything was contained, and it would go according to R3 zoning. The result of that meeting was the town stated, consider alternative designs. In September of 19, Rudy met with some of the neighbors and discussed a new plan of 5 houses with only approximately 90 feet of frontage. He made a representation of the building lots and advised the neighbors that prospective home buyers could build their houses and their garages and entrances with whatever setback from the road that's required plus whatever they needed. Again, a success for in-site development. Yada, yada, yada. Minimum 15-foot structures on separate lots would make up a cluster development shall be no less than 15 feet. In his proposal, there are approximately, this is the proposal that he made in December of last year that included a short environmental assessment plan, wetlands information, etc. He did say in the short environmental assessment plan, the proposed acreage of 4.1, the acreage to be physically distributed was 3.5 acres. So the maximum of each lot would be 0.58 or less acres. That's by taking the 0.51 off of the 4.01 acres that he owns and giving it to green space or making a truck go in and out. Also, the wetlands section 13 of the EAF mapper summary shows that discrepancies in the documentations in the mapping is incomplete. He's listed this at 12A, and he's also listed it at the end that says, yes, digital mapping information on local federal wetlands and water bodies is known to be incomplete. Refer to the EAF workbook. I have a chart of all the homes in the area. It's listed as a table of the surrounding areas. The smallest lot anywhere on these roads was 644 VanAlystyne. It was built in 1975, and the frontage width was 104 feet. Note, a most recent orchard tree development that is now called Apricot Lane, just down the road from us on Whiting, north of Clem, shows that there are 11 houses. The average price of sales is $285,000, generating revenue of approximately $10,000 a year in taxes. And no variance was listed, and all the properties are over 0.65 acres. Here's my questions. With some incorrect information in the sketch plan submitted at the 12/19 meeting, and this preliminary final site plan and subdivision approving for a public hearing, I would like to hear the Planning Board, Town of Webster, address these questions. You may have them in front of you. Should Insight return with a corrected presentation as there are mistakes on their December 9th submission, which was discussed at the December 9th submission, discussed at the December 19th meeting. In the CAF, agriculture is checked. An unmowed field cannot be agriculture. Yes, nothing has grown there for over 10 years, no weeds, it just needs to be brush hogged 3 times a year. Maybe it should have been checked rural, non-agricultural. Page 2, question 6, predominant character of existing landscape. Does 0.5 acres per lot qualify for that description? It makes a good point that the property across the road from me and VanAlystyne, Kevin Bartasek, there are no properties within 1 mile with a frontage of less than 100 feet. Further down, question 19, edited, has any adjoining property at any solid waste facility? Would that describe septic tanks? Because on the north side, and 809 and 811 Shoemaker all have septic tanks. So do I, and so does Ron and Sandy. Further, one more question about correction of the paperwork that was submitted. A wetland study should be conducted on this parcel as there are conflicting and incomplete data on this location. Knowledge of previous owners in the last 50 years, some of them were in this audience, substantiate the low water table and poor drainage. It could make for a federal or local designation for wetlands protection. That's question number 1. Question number 2 is if they feel a cluster development is required based on the Zone 2 R2 compliance and the general nature of the surrounding properties. The legislative intent of the board is the intent and purpose of the section to enable and encourage flexibility in the design and development in a way so it is to promote the most appropriate use of the land. Question number 3. Or if Insight should ask the zoning board for 5 10-foot variances to reduce the 100-foot frontage requirement down to 90 feet and keep it zoned R2. Question number 4, if they would like to reconsider the presented idea that was compliant with Zone R2 zoning and have 2 flagship lots that was presented on August 20th of 2019. My final question was build 5 houses instead of 6. Side note, also under consideration, Laurel Landing. Are we coming back for a sign for a monument? Is that all incorporated into whatever the cluster is? Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. A bunch of stuff here. Do you guys want to address any of that, or?
I wouldn't know where to start. Where
I
would
can give you my
the
page.
No. The area is R2.
Yes,
Their application that we have is for cluster development.
previously R2.
Well, still cluster development in an R2 district, which is an allowed use. So if they put a cluster development in R2, then they have to follow the setbacks and so on of the R2. We already, Steve went through that, explained what they were. It conforms to what the code is calling for. So I didn't.
I'm sort of torn between why we can just have a cluster development pop up in a very rurally sort of larger homes and larger lot neighborhoods just to fulfill the needs of the builder without going to the zoning board and asking them to make a cluster
No, that doesn't
development.
work that way. There's no need for it to go to the zoning board. A cluster development comes to this board right here. And that's where it ends. And that's, we have to deal with it. The restriction in a cluster development is that there needs to be a trade-off. You can take a larger piece of land which you can't build on, you're restricted to build on, but that land then is, I don't know if it's a whole lengthy thing, but that land then becomes open space area the way he's showing it here, the lots are deep lots, what are they? They're like 300 feet deep, 300 and something feet deep, which is half again the standard lot. It's 10 feet, these lots are 10 feet smaller. Let me finish. These lots are 10 feet smaller than a standard R3 lot would be, which would be 100 feet. So they've got way more in depth. Now, the benefit of this is there's the cul-de-sac in the back. There's that open area is maintained with, green space area.
So that open area, would that be owned by the town?
Well, it becomes a town district, I guess. How do you guys usually?
Call them park districts, but they're not really a park. It's
Park
just
district?
open space. It's just reserved open space, allows some
Yeah.
modifications to designs to help.
It could be maintained, or it could be grown with trees, or whatever.
Or we could put a cell tower up, or
No, you can't.
solar panel?
No, now you're carrying things
No,
into
okay,
another world.
but that's today's thing.
That would have to stay as vacant open space land. Could never develop it, could never put anything in there. It stays as a natural feature in there, that's it.
So,
So the benefit, I can see where, if you're on Shoemaker Road, you can say, well, it really doesn't benefit me so much. But in the sense of the depth of the lots, if the houses are set back, they are extremely deep lots. And the open space in the back actually protects the lots in the cul-de-sac over on Coventry Drive.
that is correct, yes.
So they benefit from that open space. They're not looking at the backyards of houses.
So, we're also talking about the setback from the road of being a minimum of 60 feet.
Yep. R2.
We were given the understanding and the hope that the people could build their lots, build their houses further back into the middle of the area and not have to deal with that roll. One
Oh, you
back
mean
here
broken
or
up
there.
like,
Pardon?
you mean undulated?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they vary.
It doesn't-
That's a possibility too, yeah. That's a possibility. That could be, somebody may want their house set back 70 feet, they could do it. 80 feet.
The 60-foot setback is a minimum.
Correct. I'm 107 feet back from the road. It's a long walk to the mailbox in the winter.
Yeah.
Well, those are the only things that I wanted to say, was that there's errors in his submission. I don't feel personally a cluster development is required in West Webster, where my life is worth living. And I would really appreciate 5 houses instead of 6, but maximize profits.
Well, you say that, but in reality, here, you have 10, if you made them 100 foot, you'd have 50 feet more of land there. Would you notice the difference? No.
Well,
No.
let me ask you, many people do want it, well, then they wouldn't buy there. They wouldn't buy
No,
those
that's
lots
right. So
because
if
they're
there's
not.
an issue, see, that's it. That's the bottom line. People don't buy it, they don't feel it's.
And they're about to.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time, that's all I had to say.
Okay, you did a very good job, appreciate it too. All right, is there anyone else who should speak? Any neighbors? Yes, ma'am. Just give us your name and address.
My name is June Melvin, and
You bring it down a little bit, we'll just kind of,
on my tiptoes.
there, just pull
My
it down.
name is June Melvin, I live on Coventry Drive, and you probably have answered this question already, but I noticed that you had like is that a retention pond? Or some kind of a pond on, is it the corner of Shoemaker and VanAlystyne?
Yeah, it'll be small. Mr. Yana can answer that type of thing for you.
Is that a retention pond?
So it's actually
Use the microphone, use the microphone.
It's actually infiltration pond. In that area, we have Class A hydrologic group soils, which means very well drained. We did percolation tests in that area, and water infiltrates very fast, so we are utilizing that area to
mean, or is it gonna be like kind of stagnant so that like,
You gotta use that microphone.
I want to know if it will move or if it'll be times where it'll be stagnant, like, so mosquitoes will kind of breed in there?
As I mentioned, the water will infiltrate within several hours. The soils are very sandy there, so water will sit there just for several hours and then infiltrate the ground. So there won't be any time for mosquitoes to breed.
Okay, thank you.
That area that you're speaking, is that right on that lot then? It's right on that corner lot? You know, it's part of that one lot.
Except in storm events, that'll be a depression, that'll be mowed, grass like all the rest of it. A big storm event, and they collect, and then it'll be basically lawn.
All right, anybody, any issues? Any feelings on it? Yeah, I'll be perfectly honest, I'm okay with with the project and as a cluster, but, I'd rather see, again, I'll use those numbers wherever I can. If it's a 90-foot lot, and you had 12.5 foot on either side, that gives you a 65-foot house. That's a pretty good sized house. And I'd rather see that as opposed to 8 feet. That's a little bit more width in there, and it's on the main road. It conforms better to the existing houses in the town. You know, along the main road like that. That's just my feeling on it. Everything else, I'm okay with it. Anybody? You guys have any?
I'd like to see a little bit more.
A little more side setback, right?
Have you done wetland delineation?
Yes, we looked at the site and we performed test bits, and the entire site is sands, which usually don't support wetlands. There's no wetland vegetation, no signs of hydrology indicating wetlands.
Was there also part of this project cleaning up some of the water issues that neighboring properties have? Is that still accounted for in the way the conveyed properties design?
I didn't hear the question.
I'm sorry, wasn't there in the original discussions around this project, considerations given to the flow of water from surrounding properties or stagnating water or those kinds of things that were going to be addressed as
No,
part
the
of
only water
conveyance?
issue is that our neighbors to the east, and they're here, they can speak for themselves if they would like. They've had a long-standing water issue on their property, which is off our eastern border. There's a swale there, doesn't really function properly. So in dealing with our neighborhood meeting, we volunteered to take a 20-foot easement, which has been granted and filed. We're going to run our discharge pipe through it, but as a function of that, regrade and put a central little regional catch basin in their yard at the proper elevation to drain the water that they have 20 or however many years they've been there. So that's been agreed to as part of the plan, and they can speak to the rest of the water issues if they would like.
Anybody?
Somebody.
Oh.
Lloyd Park, 593 Notre Dame Drive. I am the neighbor that Rudy was referring to. My backyard right now is underwater. Probably will be underwater through probably halfway through April, if I'm lucky. Last year it was already ready through May before I could mow. I guess the only question I had for Rudy, if I heard him correctly, was the water drained from the field into my yard, or was it draining from my yard to the field with the pond would be?
Actually, is just a small portion draining towards your backyard, which is located in this area. The rest is draining to the front, right? So the drainage you are receiving is from all the surrounding existing backyards, and because you have the depression there, it's just being collected there. What the applicant is proposing is a storm sewer.
You can't hear what you're saying.
Yeah,
It's a storm sewer,
there'll be a storm sewer in my yard,
and
catch basin where the water will, well, where will it drain to? Wasn't there gonna be a retention pond?
no, that will drain to the roadside, the storm sewer system.
Out to Notre Dame?
Yes. There is existing storm sewer, and that water gets there eventually, but because the swale is not well defined and drainage is blocked, it's sitting in your backyard for a long period of time. We'll just beat it up.
Well, I understand there is a storm basin out here right at the corner between my lot and the next door neighbor. But, I guess I really don't care as long as the water
Hold the
leaves
mic
my
up. Hold
backyard.
the mic up.
Oh, the mic's not on?
Just hold it. You gotta hold it up.
Oh, okay.
There you
Is
go.
that better? Okay. I just was of the understanding that there was actually going to be a retention pond back in this corner, but that's,
It'd be just moved over a little bit more to the west.
okay. And you mentioned, with this being a green space, who's actually going to maintain that?
The owners have the right to maintain it, they can cut the grass, they can choose to let it grow natural, so each neighbor will decide how they want to maintain it.
So you may get one cut it here, this, they don't, they do, they don't, so is that? That's not good.
That's a possibility.
Yeah.
That's a is it likely? No, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, I don't think most people will start cutting property that they don't own. I mean, let's be realistic. So this could be really like the field is.
That could be natural if that's the way that people choose to live.
You mentioned earlier, you talked about this being sand.
Yes.
Do you have an engineer, or some sort of report? I mean, my yard is certainly not sand, my mother's yard's not sand. That's clay. How is this sand in the neighboring yards not?
Actually, there is a transition somewhere in this area where you get the clay in your backyard, and this is very, very sandy. We dug holes about 10 feet deep. There was about 8 feet of sand in those holes. We did about 8 test pits throughout the property, and we also did percolation tests to show how fast the water infiltrates in the ground, and it was very rapid in those locations. I believe this to be completely different scenario where you have clay and perhaps it's compacted as well, so it doesn't infiltrate.
Well, that's news to me.
Okay, we gotta get this thing back going here. The meeting's up here and to the table over there, that's it. But,
I don't really have a perfect answer, but I would throw out, Mr. Kashani, I would like to not restrict, I don't know who my buyers are gonna be. They're gonna be Webster people that want to live in Webster. I believe the majority will be family houses. And I do believe that for some of these buyers that want a large colonial or a third-car garage, that additional side space may be necessary. So would the board consider a compromise of 10 and 10, which would still allow me to build a third-car garage or
well,
something?
with a lot, with the 90 feet, Rudy, in my opinion,
10 and 10 gives me 7.
you could put 12 foot from the line, you could build a house, and you could put side-loaded garages, and you could put 4 of them in a row going back, because you got the depth. So it's not, everything doesn't have to be along the road. it could be on the side and side loaded, and that would work, you know that, right?
It could, I would
There you go. Yeah,
respectfully request a 10-foot. I mean, the code allows me to go 15 feet in the thing. We went to 8.
Well,
If
I
they
know,
would
I'm
consider
seeing it,
compromise with
I'm
10,
seeing
that
it,
would
but I
be
can understand, I can see some of the issues. Go back to that piece of land in the back, I don't think anybody should be allowed to go in there and just mow and do what they want, it's town property at that point, right? You showing it, going
It's a town land.
dedicated to now, so they have no right going in there and mowing it. That should be left forever wild.
Most town, we don't, the town doesn't do anything. It's more than that.
What's that?
The town doesn't do anything.
No,
So the tree farm does.
because you've got that access road going back in there. That would be maintained by the town. Okay, we gotta get this thing off the center here. What do you guys wanna do with this thing? Where are we going?
Well, if there are errors in the, okay, you'll get to rewrite that or resubmit.
Are there errors in it? I don't know.
So the things were highlighted, these were errors.
Okay, all right.
Items that were pointed out, the note about the wetlands.
Mhm.
Okay, well, the engineer of the wetlands.
So we've got that, so we call it.
Could you get closer to your ear, Mark, please? We have a hard time.
The items that you talked about in the EAF were addressed by the engineers. You mentioned the wetlands, the wetland delineation.
Well, you were saying something about, what Laura pointed out as being errors in the application. And
Yeah, I didn't see that as being errors on the application. Because what the EAF is, it goes to identify these things and take a look at it. In particular, the wetlands, and do a wetland delineation, and they're not in an area that's being disturbed by the development. So, it's-
Yeah, so that property would have to be just left. That's what we're. Yeah.
Tell prospective buyers that that's.
They have no business doing anything on that property.
it off.
Yes, that would be just simply extending their yard. If they did that, before you know it, they'd be throwing trash back there. And then the people on Coventry would be looking at, you know,
The plan does delineate 4x4 markers along that road to
Yeah.
clarify to the neighbors where your property is.
all right, okay, what, again, we're still in this public hearing. Is there anyone else wishing to speak before we close it? All right, then we'll close the public hearing in regard to this project. Bring it back up to the board, anyone concerned, what do you guys want to do with this?
I'd like to see, a wider separation between houses. We were talking about 12, but he's going about 10. I'd be okay with 10.
10 foot between 10 and 10, so you have 20 feet.
Between houses.
That really shouldn't create it. All right, Derek, you okay with that?
Yeah, the additional space on the.
Yeah. That also. And I believe your mom's place,
15.
all right, so, okay, we gotta write that down. So 15 feet at the east end
Lot 6.
at lot number 6, yes. The east property line, lot number 6. East property line, lot number 6, to maintain 15-foot side setback. And setbacks between the houses. Actually, you could do with this thing too, is make it a minimum of 20 feet of separation. This way here, if you want to move one this way or that way, you still have 20 feet in between, okay?
That's a great
Does that work for you?
suggestion. So it
See what I'm saying?
could be 12 and 8, depending
Yeah.
on what.
You have
that's
minimum,
really-
you have 8 foot,
That will
but
give
then
the
the other
buyer
guy
the
has to have
change.
12 foot. So there's 12, that gives you 20 feet between. Gives you a little bit more, okay? It's not gonna be as big as yours, but. All
It
right.
still is cutting from 30 feet down to 20 feet, that's a third of the loss for the people who live close to each other.
Well, you know, unfortunately, that's part of what the code says, so we're trying to even put more on to him beyond what the code allows, you know, so anyways. You okay? John, good?
I like this design significantly better than the non-cluster
Yeah.
design. I think it fits better.
Yep. And then that piece of land stays in for a while in the back there. And then that'll be delineated and marked as such. All right, you wanna? Do a secret, right?
Motion for unlisted action. The Town of Webster Planning Board consider request the applicant Insight Land Development Incorporated for cluster development consisting of 6 single-family lots on a 4.01 acre parcel located in the southeast corner of the intersection of VanAlystyne Road and Shoemaker Road, and a parcel having SBL number 064.01-2-2512. The planning board determined that the proposed action is an unlisted action under Part 617 of the State Environmental Quality Review Regulations. The planning board determined that the action is subject to a single agency review pursuant to Part 617.6B1 of Seeker, and that it is the most appropriate agency for making the determination of significance. The planning board therefore designates itself as lead agency for the proposed action. The planning board has considered consideration to the criteria for determining significance as set forth in section 617.7C1 of Seeker, and has, number 1, considered the information contained in the short environmental assessment form dated January 27th, 2020. Number 2, consider public comments directed to the planning board during concept review, the plan review, and the public hearing held on March 3rd, 2020. And number 3, completed part 2 of the environmental assessment form. Now therefore be it resolved that the Town of Webster Planning Board hereby determines that the proposed action will not have a significant adverse effect on the environment for the reasons set forth in the attached notice of determination on non-significance. Be it further resolved that the Town of Planning Board has authorized to take actions reasonable and responsible to file a negative declaration and discharge the Town of Webster Planning Board's responsibility as lead agency for this action. Be it further resolved that the Town of Webster Planning Board, based on the information and analysis above, and reference supporting documentation and discussions of the action by the Town of Webster Planning Board as documented by the minutes for this meeting, and that the proposed action will not result in significant environmental impact. Be it further resolved that the Town of Webster Planning Board therefore makes a determination of non-significance. Be it further resolved that the Town of Webster Planning Board, based on the reasons above, issues a negative declaration of evidence of this determination.
Second.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Giardina?
Aye.
Mr. Mixel?
Aye.
Mr. Coso?
Aye.
Mr. Malka?
Aye.
Mr. Reno?
Aye.
Mr. Pashano?
Aye. Okay, there's the, applications and for preliminary and, we have a few things that we want to add in. Anybody want to do it or just? Go ahead and do it. All right, and I'll make a motion for preliminary approval for the, what's the drawing? It's drawing 2612 for Laurel Landing. Preliminary approval for the 6-lot subdivision, and make that subject to, from the requirements of cluster development, the board has determined that there be a minimum of 20 feet separation between houses. It could be 8, we're talking 8 or 12, but
The minimum is 5.
total of 20 feet between residences. And the eastern lot number 6, to maintain a 15-foot eastern side setback from the back property, okay? We'll put that in, get that out of there. And then we'll make this subject to all the PRC comments. And, let's see, water credit, we can do that for final years. Conservation, subdivision, water subdivision. No variance were required for that project. So we don't get variances. Address any land to be conveyed to the town, that's been shown as the exempt parcel, the dedicated parcel. Recent subdivision approval, let's see, all the improvements. All improvements to be constructed according to the specifications of the town of Webster. And roadway construction, that gravel road going in, is to be in accordance with the specs and regulations set by the town. All site work is to be in compliance with standards of the town of Webster. Reserve any mature trees on the site where possible. Comply with all the requirements of state, county, and town agencies. Address drainage, lighting, signage, put 13, but really it's the drainage which you've addressed that. Let's see, landscape, hardscape, site accessory, associated finished grading. Okay, so let's call it finished grading design for the development must be prepared by a licensed landscape architect. Final landscape plans, there is seal and signature of the architect. And approvals are subject to verse 2612. Okay, that would be a preliminary approval.
Mr. Shawnee?
Aye.
Mr. Malta? Mr. Arena?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Coastal?
Aye.
Mr. Mixel?
Aye.
Mr. Gardner?
Aye.
Okay, so for final approval, want to move forward if there's any reason? You guys are all okay with that? All right. Okay, so we'll move to the final approval too. Final approval for the same project, 2612. We'll make that subject to all PRC comments. That would be subject to, parks and recreation fees as determined by the town board, I should say. And subject to all preliminary approval conditions, and subject to all applicable governmental fees, subject to the Department of Public Works approvals. Significant construction to occur within 1 year is due by the planning board to expire on March 3rd, 2021. Let's see, the conditions, we've got to follow up with this stuff too. The conditions of the preliminary and final approval are depicted on the cover sheet of the final approved drawings. They need to be on, we've got some, we went back and they're just non-existent, so it's got to be done. The engineer for the proposed project shall provide a letter of certification that all the proposed work was completed as per planning board resolution of the final approval before a certificate of occupancy will be issued. A letter of credit to the town for the project shall include the fee for the engineer's final certification inspection. Stormwater, stormwater facilities to be constructed first, so that means that thing on the corner you're gonna have to, so the water drains in. All stormwater facilities to be constructed first. Downspouts, you're running their sheet runoff, right? Which is all right, and let's see. And make that subject to the resolution and final approved minutes. And the approval is subject to the same drawing. That's it.
Mr. Shawnee?
Aye.
Mr. Malta? Mr. Arena?
Aye.
Mr. Anderson?
Aye.
Mr. Coastal?
Aye.
Mr. Mr. Mixel?
Aye.
Mr. Giardina?
Okay, guess you're all set.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.